usually when we talk about a crime scene, there's this expectation of a highly controlled environment.
Right, like the yellow tape goes up.
Exactly. The tape goes up, the perimeter is locked down, and investigators meticulously collect like every single physical clue left behind. It's very methodical. It's sterile.
Which is how it should be, ideally.
Ideally, yeah. But then you look at cases where a crime happens in the middle of everyday life, surrounded by hundreds of people. Suddenly, that controlled environment just doesn't exist at all.
It completely evaporates.
Right. You're looking at a deeply fragile investigative landscape. Evidence is basically being trampled the exact second it's created. Okay, let's unpack this, because this is a case that sat completely unsolved, just haunting this community for nearly 3 decades, until it suddenly saw this massive scientific breakthrough in late 2024.
A huge breakthrough.
Huge. But to understand how monumental that 2024 breakthrough actually is, we really have to understand the absolute collapse of the physical evidence back in 1995.
Yeah, so let's set the scene. Picture a warm Friday evening on June 9th.
Just a classic summer night.
Exactly. It is a completely normal, highly relatable community event. Morgan and her mother, Colleen, are just hanging out at the Little League game.
Like thousands of other families on a Friday.
Right. And as the game winds down, Morgan asks to go catch fireflies with a couple of friends. She's, playing in the sand near the parking lot. At one point, she actually stops by her mother's car to empty the sand from her shoes.
Which is such a specific, normal kid detail.
It really is. But then, within this tiny 30-minute window, she completely vanishes.
See, it is the terrifying contrast that really gets me. You have this incredibly mundane setting. A youth baseball game, kids running around, parents are chatting in the bleachers. Imagine how quickly normal life just shatters for you.
In an instant.
1 minute it's bubblegum and baseball, and the next you transition directly into the most critical and notoriously chaotic phase of any missing person case, the frantic aftermath.
Chaos is definitely the word for it. The physical environment and human memory instantly start colliding, which massively complicates the early investigation.
Right, because people panic.
Exactly. And we see that collision immediately in the eyewitness testimony. From the true crime blogs we reviewed, 2 children, 8-year-old Jessica and 10-year-old Ty, were the last to actually see Morgan.
Okay, and what did they see?
They described seeing a white male with a scruffy beard, an open shirt with chest hair, and he was smoking a cigarette.
Okay, pretty specific.
Yeah. And they said he was sitting in a red truck with a poorly fitted white camper shell parked right near Morgan.
Wait, though, we're talking about testimony from an 8- and 10-year-old in the dark.
Right.
Like, as someone who has been to chaotic Little League games, headlights are flashing, kids are screaming, parents are packing up coolers. How much weight can investigators actually put on that description in the moment? I feel like people's memories are so heavily influenced by ambient panic.
That's a really valid point. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this is exactly why the first 48 hours of a missing child case are statistically the most critical, but also the most vulnerable to contamination.
Because everyone is just overwhelmed.
Exactly. Law enforcement has to triage information instantly. They're trying to establish a perimeter, verify witness statements, and manage a flood of well-meaning public interference all at the exact same time.
Which has to be impossible.
It nearly is.
Yeah.
And that initial chaos is exactly what allows perpetrators to slip through the cracks. They rely on the confusion of the crowd and the darkness of that parking lot.
And it wasn't just the crowd, right? The physical environment was actively working against the police that night.
Oh, absolutely. The Alma area had just suffered severe flooding.
Right. I read that fields were reportedly 4 feet underwater in some places.
4 feet, yeah.
Which severely limits the physical search area. And it even blocked a group of teenagers who later told police they saw a truck matching that exact description, the red truck, with a man appearing to hold a child down.
Which is a terrifying detail.
It is. But because the floodwaters had cut off the roads, those teenagers physically couldn't lead police back to the exact spot.
So you factor in that environmental destruction with the human element, the rumors and missteps that inevitably happen when hundreds of panicked people are trying to help.
Yeah, man, the rumors.
Yeah. There was a rumor circulating early on that the truck parked next to Colleen's car was actually a Mazda belonging to another parent at the game.
Which was completely undocumented.
Completely fabricated by the chaos, yeah.
But it still wasted highly valuable investigative time. When you have a golden window of 48 hours, spending 3 of those hours chasing a phantom Mazda means the real red truck is crossing state lines.
It's devastating.
Honestly, Trying to run an investigation that night sounds like trying to put together a jigsaw puzzle in the middle of a hurricane, where half the pieces are actively washing away.
And the bystanders keep handing you pieces from a different puzzle entirely.
Yes, exactly. It's just an impossible situation.
And once those floodwaters finally receded and the immediate trails went cold, law enforcement and the family were left with a really stark reality.
They had to settle in for the long haul.
Right. They had to completely pivot their strategy from a localized, frantic sprint through the woods into a multi-year marathon. And surviving that marathon requires a very specific type of psychological and logistical architecture.
Which brings us to the insights from the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, the OJJDP. They published this family survival guide for when a child goes missing. And I have to say, reading that guide completely changes how you view these cases on television.
How so?
Well, when you hear about a missing person on the news, you probably wonder why the family seems so stoic or composed on camera while talking about the worst thing imaginable.
Right. People often judge them for not crying enough.
Exactly. But this DOJ guide explains exactly why they act that way. It forces an immediate, unnatural evolution.
It outlines a grueling procedural reality. We see Colleen Nick essentially transform overnight from a grieving mother into the CEO of a massive search operation.
She eventually created the Morgan Nick Foundation, right?
She did. But the day-to-day operations described in the DOJ guide are intensely methodical. Parents have to learn how to manage literally armies of volunteers without compromising potential evidence.
Which is a full-time job in itself.
It is. They have to establish tip lines, specifically utilizing services like Crime Stoppers.
And the mechanism behind that is so crucial. Like, why Crime Stoppers specifically? Because in a high-profile case, the people who often have the most valuable information are criminals themselves.
Or people deeply embedded in the perpetrator's life.
Exactly. They won't call the police directly because they fear prosecution for their own unrelated crimes, or they fear retaliation from the abductor.
Right, so services like Crime Stoppers use encrypted tip routing.
So the caller's identity is entirely stripped before the tip reaches investigators.
Exactly, it's a vital tool. But beyond the logistics, families have to do all of this while navigating an emotional minefield of bad actors.
Oh, this part of the sources was so hard to read.
It's sickening. The sources detail the agonizing toll of dealing with fake leads. There's a deeply disturbing section in the DOJ guide detailing how to handle extortion scammers.
People actually do that.
Yes, these are organized groups who track missing child cases online. They will call the family, use details they scraped from Facebook, and demand Bitcoin ransoms pretending they have the child.
How does a family even process that? Like, you pick up the phone and someone says they have your kid.
It's pure psychological torture. The guide actually instructs families on how to compartmentalize these calls. Law enforcement sets up specific protocols for families to triage these ransoms.
Wait, what kind of protocols?
Well, they teach them to ask for proof-of-life questions, things only the child would know, to quickly filter out the digital scammers from a genuine threat.
That is so dark. Not to mention families having to deal with psychics who claim to have visions.
Oh, the psychics.
In some cases, families are so desperate they literally mail off their missing child's precious stuffed animals to these individuals hoping for a clue, and then they never get them back.
The psychological burden is almost unimaginable. In the sources, we see quotes from other parents of missing children, like Patty Wetterling, whose son Jacob was abducted.
I remember that case.
Yeah, she articulated that the trauma is ongoing, that there was no post in their PTSD, because the stress never actually stops. The ambiguity is a constant stressor.
And yet, out of that agonizing procedural campaign, real, tangible infrastructure was born. Colleen Nick's advocacy led directly to the creation of the Morgan Nick Alert, which is Arkansas's localized version of the Amber Alert system.
Which is incredible. It was designed to fix the exact problem they faced on June 9th.
Right. Now, the moment a child is in danger, a mechanism activates every law enforcement agency and hundreds of media outlets in the state simultaneously, basically freezing that golden 48-hour window.
And that procedural shift is vital because, as the search drags from days into years, the fundamental reality of the case changes.
What do you mean?
Well, the child is no longer the 6-year-old girl who vanished from the ball field. The physical reality of the child is altering every single day.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Which introduces an incredibly heartbreaking logistical problem. How do you keep searching for a face that no longer exists in photographs? And that takes us into the science of time and the incredible work done by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, or NCMAC. NCMSC employs highly skilled forensic artists who specialize in age progression.
And this raises an important question. How do you age a face that hasn't grown yet?
Right. Because it's not just running a photo through some digital aging filter on your phone.
Not at all. It is a painstaking 8-hour forensic process. Forensic artists don't just guess. They use specific craniofacial markers. They literally map the growth plates of the skull.
That is wild.
They project how the jawline will expand, how the nasal cartilage will lengthen, and even how the space between the eyes will shift as a child hits puberty.
And they merge those structural projections with reference photos of the biological parents and siblings at the target age, right? To factor in hereditary traits like a mother's cheekbones or a father's brow line.
Exactly. And they repeat this intense process every 2 years until the child would be 18, and then every 5 years after that.
I can't even imagine what that's like for the parents. Colleen Nick described the visceral reaction to receiving these updated photos via email. She prefers to open them alone because, in her words, seeing a new version of your missing child pierces your heart.
It's devastating.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? Imagine the surreal, painful experience of watching your child grow up only through the digital imagination of a forensic artist. It's profoundly emotional, but it serves a very specific, cold purpose.
Exactly. We have to ground that emotion in forensic utility because these images are incredibly effective.
Really? How effective?
Well, out of the 7,500 age progressions NCMSC has done, 1,800 children have been safely recovered.
Wow, that's a huge number.
It is. We saw this famously with J.C. Dugard, who was recognized after 18 years in captivity. The procedural reason these images are vital is that they break media fatigue.
Media fatigue, that's the point where the public just tunes out because they've seen the same 1995 photo 1,000 times.
Precisely. A new age-progressed image gives law enforcement a tangible reason to put the cold case back into the 24-hour news cycle.
It refreshes the whole investigation.
Exactly. More importantly, it ensures the public is looking for the correct person. In Morgan's case today, they need the public looking for a woman in her 30s, not a little girl in a Girl Scout shirt.
Right. It keeps the image alive. And just as forensic art advanced to keep Morgan's image current, forensic science was quietly advancing in the background.
Yes, it was.
Finally preparing to catch up with the microscopic physical evidence left behind on that humid night in 1995. Which brings us to the massive 2024 breakthrough.
Yeah, so let's get into that.
Yeah.
In 2019, the Alma Police Department got a new chief, Jeff Pointer. He decided to strip the entire massive 24-year-old case file back to the raw facts.
Just starting from scratch.
He threw out the rumors, the psychic tips, the Mazda theories, and went back to day one.
And when he did, he identified a chilling timeline hidden in all that noise. The red truck with the poorly fitted white camper shell wasn't just lurking in the parking lot.
No, it wasn't.
According to the true crime blogs, sources, and police reports, that same truck had been harassing multiple children across Alma that very night.
Which is terrifying.
It really is. It approached a teenage girl walking down the street. It sped away from two young girls playing in a yard. The driver yelled at two different groups of boys riding their bikes. It wasn't a crime of opportunity in a vacuum. It was a clear, escalating pattern of predatory behavior leading right up to the moment Morgan vanished.
And recognizing that behavioral pattern allowed investigators to shift their focus. Early in the case, they had looked at high-profile suspects, like a local serial killer named Charles Ray Vines.
Right, who had made some suspicious claims before dying.
Exactly. But Chief Pointer's back-to-basics approach brought a different name back to the surface, Billy Jack Lynx.
Okay, so who is Billy Jack Lynx?
He lived in a neighboring town. And just 2 months after Morgan disappeared, Lynx attempted to abduct an 11-year-old girl from a Sonic drive-in just 8 miles away.
Oh my gosh.
He tried to lure her with money, made sexual comments, and when her friends bravely intervened, he drove off erratically.
And let me guess what he was driving.
A red 1986 Chevy truck.
Wow. Okay, so why wasn't he locked up for Morgan's case back then?
Well, Lynx was arrested for that Sonic incident and eventually died in prison in 2000. He actually passed a polygraph regarding Morgan early on, which unfortunately temporarily deflected suspicion.
Those polygraphs can be so problematic.
It really can. But in 2020, investigators decided to track down his old red Chevy truck. It had been sold at auction and passed through multiple different owners over the decades.
And the most recent owner had bought it simply to restore with his 3-year-old grandson.
Right, yeah. Just a totally innocent buyer.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, because you might think, What could possibly be left in a truck that has been driven by multiple people for 25 years?
You'd think nothing.
Right. But the FBI brings in their evidence response team in July of 2020. They don't just look around, they literally deconstruct the interior. They use specialized trace evidence collection filters.
These aren't just normal vacuums.
No, they use micro mesh filters designed to capture debris down to the cellular level without destroying it. They pull up the floor covers, take out the seats, and collect canisters of raw, deeply embedded debris.
And then what happened?
In late 2023, they send that debris to an advanced facility in Texas, an Othram laboratory. And in September 2024, 29 years after Morgan disappeared, they get a bombshell report.
What's fascinating here is the absolute resilience of microscopic trace evidence and the specific mechanism scientists use to read it today.
What did they find?
From those vacuum canisters, the lab identified a single microscopic hair. Now, older DNA technology required a hair root, the follicle, to extract nuclear DNA. If the hair was just broken off, it was essentially useless.
Because the root contains the actual cells that hold your unique genetic blueprint.
Exactly. But Othram specializes in advanced mitochondrial DNA extraction. Mitochondrial DNA is found in the shaft of the hair itself, and it is passed down directly from the maternal line.
Wait, so they didn't even need the root?
Nope. Even from a rootless, degraded hair that had been baked in an Arkansas truck for decades, they extracted enough material to run a profile.
That is incredible.
It is. That profile confirmed that the hair belonged to Colleen Nick, one of her siblings, or Morgan herself. And because Colleen and her family had never even met Billy Jack Links, let alone been in his truck.
The implication is undeniable.
It is absolute proof.
But the science didn't stop at the hair, did it?
No, it didn't.
They also found blue-green fibers trapped underneath the floor mat and compressed under the metal seat brackets. To test these, police sent in a known sample, a shirt identical to the specific green Girl Scout t-shirt Morgan was wearing that night.
Right.
And the lab didn't just eyeball it, they used spectrophotometry.
Spectrophotometry is an incredible tool. It bounces specific wavelengths of light off a microscopic fiber to measure exactly how it absorbs and reflects that light.
So it's looking at the color on a chemical level.
Exactly. It allows scientists to look at the exact chemical composition of the dye used to color the fiber. It proved that the fibers found under the seat brackets didn't just look similar. They matched the chemical dye signature of that specific Girl Scout shirt optically and microscopically.
Think about that. DNA and chemical dye signatures surviving the Arkansas heat, surviving multiple new owners who vacuumed and washed the truck, and surviving nearly 3 decades of wear and tear.
It's honestly a miracle.
It is a testament to how far forensic science has come. That microscopic breakthrough provides definitive physical proof that Morgan Nick was in that specific truck. It allowed the Alma Police Department to take a case that had over 10,000 dead-end leads and narrow it down to a single, undeniable suspect.
It is an incredible journey. From a chaotic, flooded ball field in 1995, where eyewitness testimony was muddied by darkness and panic, to the cutting-edge, sterile laboratories of 2024, pulling a single strand of truth from a rusted floorboard.
It really is. Though it is a bittersweet reality for the family. Billy Jack Links is dead. He can't be interrogated. He can't tell them where Morgan is. Morgan is still officially missing.
Yeah.
But the truth, after all these years, is finally stepping out of the shadows.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, there is one final, profound concept I want you to consider.
What's that?
Well, throughout this discussion, we've talked about the physical search, the forensic science, and the logistical protocols. But we haven't touched on the underlying psychological phenomenon that makes a case like this so uniquely devastating. It's a concept psychologists call ambiguous loss.
Ambiguous loss. That's a really powerful term.
It is. Ambiguous loss occurs when a loved one is physically absent, but psychologically present. Unlike a typical death, where society has established rituals, funerals, obituaries, a grave site to visit, ambiguous loss offers absolutely no closure.
Because you just don't know for sure.
Right. The brain literally cannot process the finality of the situation because the finality hasn't been proven. The loved one is frozen in time. Society is only just beginning to build therapeutic frameworks to help families navigate this specific, suspended type of grief.
That makes so much sense.
It requires a completely different approach to mental health, one that acknowledges that the trauma isn't in the past, it is happening continuously, every single day the question remains unanswered.
It fundamentally changes how you view a family holding a press conference decades later. They aren't just clinging to the past, they're actively surviving a trauma that has never actually ended. And that ongoing resilience, the refusal to let the ambiguity win, is exactly what kept the pressure on until the science could finally catch up.
It's a powerful reminder that behind every forensic breakthrough and every procedural guide, there is an enduring human element that refuses to be erased.
Because Morgan went missing, tools like the Morgan Nick Alert, specialized child abduction response teams, and advanced victim advocacy networks were forged. Her legacy is an active living shield that is quietly protecting thousands of other children around the country right now.
Absolutely.
A perfect way to close out our look at this case. Thank you for joining us as we unpack the science, the system, and the story behind the search. We'll see you next time.